What's happening, folks? Welcome back. As you saw the dog coming down, must be a special lecture. The special ones are when the cat or the dog comes walking up and down the steps when we're actually doing our thing. So, chapter 4 is looking at the concepts of technology and science and why they're important in environmental sociology, why they're important in our dialogue, and how they help shape the world that we live in. One of the first important concepts that's talked about in this particular chapter is this idea of monologues of technology and science, as if technology is part of this concept of progress. Progress, of course, is a linear process that uh, is moving forward. Everything progress focuses us on is positive, and ultimately, in the end, it's a movement forward. But that's really not how society changes, and um, it's not how technology works either. Technology is a little bit more complex of a concept, as well as science. So some of the things that we have to think about when we're thinking about the monologues of technology and science are that, technology, once it takes shape, it seems as if it's a final result, or it's inevitable, and the structures that are created are somehow unchangeable. That just isn't the case. And you can see that in our historical record. The computer did not exist 100 years ago, but society continued to move forward. And in the future, the computer will be very different than it is today. I was watching a Windows commercial the other day, and it had this young girl with her tablet that she was running around with, and at one point her mom looks out and says, "What are you doing on the computer?" And the little girl says, "What's a computer?" So things are changing, and they're not always for the best. What we also forget are that technological responses are really a result of human decisions, and um, they're pursued with scientific questions that we're asking ourselves. So technology is a solution to a problem that we're experiencing at that particular time. There are alternate solutions, but those alternate solutions fall to the wayside because once the one is chosen, that's the strategy that everybody is going to engage with, and all the other alternative choices are going to be seen as nothing more than an alternative choice. Um, and then there's this concept of unfinalizability, or essentially remembering the social process of creation around any scientific endeavor allows us to step back, change what didn't work, and bring in dialogue about what we want for society. Science and technology should be based on the concept of adaptive management. Once the technology is chosen, it's put into place. We monitor whether the technology solves the problem and doesn't create too many externalities in the process. And if it does, and if these externalities that are created because of the introduction of a new piece of technology, then we have to be able to adapt our processes to address these new challenges. That brings us to the idea of technology as dialogue. We consider technology as one of the great motors of social change. But I argue that technology is a double-edged sword. The cut it makes to foil the problem or the monster that exists in our way, is one solution, but the double-edged sword is also going to make another cut, which could create some problems in and of itself. So like the economy, technology is not a mechanical imperative. It only becomes a mechanical imperative if we allow it to. And one of the things that we want to at least begin to think about at the start of this lecture is Latour's ideas on actor network theories, where humans make technology, and ultimately, once those technologies are put into place, technology begins to make humans. So humans shape technology, but technology also shapes humans. A great example of this is the automobile. So the automobile, once it gets introduced, greatly impacts the structure of our society. So some of the implications of the introduction of the automobile: in 2011, the world fleet of cars and trucks surpassed 1 billion and is expected to double by 2050. Millions of animals die each year due to traffic. Autos are serious polluters that cause air pollution and related death, acid rain, and global warming. All of these things, human deaths on the road, are a great problem with cars as well. But cars make things convenient. And once we accept this convenience, then we start to wrap these personal characteristics around the concept of the car. Like, I get personal pride out of the type of car I own, or we have some sort of romantic vision of what the car means to us. Many of our first kiss maybe happened in an automobile. First trip taken happened in an automobile. So we start to tie a lot of our own experiences around the automobile. And then our societies begin to stretch out. So as I said, our societies begin to spread out. And we start to see taking shape this idea, the social organization of convenience, or the way we often set up our lives around a particular way of doing things, so it becomes difficult to do things any other way. This really makes reference to a dialogical understanding of technology, which points to a common transformation of how to into have to. But we have to remember, this is not an inevitable process. Cars are not the only solution. And it depends on how we spend our money and allocate our resources that could change the overall social organizational structures that we put into place. Cars become convenient, and we start to justify the existence of cars because we now have massive highway systems to accommodate the driving of vehicles. We tore down trolley cars and ripped up the tracks that would normally allow trolleys and trains to deliver people in a different way. And once those structures are gone and new forms of social organization take their place, then we just see vehicles as inevitable. But they're not. There are, of course, negative externalities of the car. We think about these as hidden economic subsidies that we don't necessarily think about every time we get into our car. One being the price of military intervention to keep oil prices down. So every time you drive your car, you are supporting a war in some sort of oil-rich region that we rely on to deliver oil so we can create gas and keep our oil prices down. Another hidden subsidy is the subsidies for parking. The idea that wherever you go, whenever you arrive there, for the most part, not wherever you go, but whenever you arrive there, there is going to be some subsidized form of parking available to you when you arrive there. Most likely street parking, but an available parking space for you to pull your car into. And then, of course, roads and highway services are paid for through economic subsidies and taxes that ultimately make it less expensive for you to drive a car. We also have to think about political power. Powerful auto associations are working constantly through economic lobby to keep subsidies going to benefit their industries. So there are lobbyists going to Congress every day arguing to keep these hidden subsidies as part of the federal budget. So when we look at the history of cars, what we're really looking at is how we socially organize and socially manipulate convenience of a technology so that it becomes the most appropriate way of doing things. It doesn't mean it is the most appropriate way of doing things. It just becomes that way. That also brings us to this idea of technological somnambulism, or why we so willingly sleepwalk through the process of reconstituting the conditions of human existence. In essence, why we willingly sleepwalk through the social reproduction of the automobile in our existence time after time after time. One is in reference to the phenomenology of technology, one is in reference to the culture of technology, and the last is in reference to the politics of technology. The phenomenology of technology is making reference to the manner in which we experience the phenomenon in everyday life, or its routinization. If there's nothing more clear in life, it's that it is routine. How do we socially reproduce the same world day in and day out? Well, we do that through routines that are similar to what we did the day before, and they will be similar to what we do the day after. Another important concept is this idea of recipes of understanding, or through accumulated experience, we establish a series of little routines that we call upon without having to think the whole thing through each time. There are assumptions about the way we do things that we don't need to think about day in and day out. They're just assumptions. And when we use technology, it requires a similar process. And routinization follows patterns of technology we have socially organized as a convenient way to do things. So this idea of how we create routines in our lives, how we allow for technology to become part of the routinized process of our lives. Think about computers today. We have computers that take care of almost all of the basic functions that we as humans had to normally take care of in the past. And we are now seeing this as normal. Alexa, turn off my lights. Alexa, order my grocery list from Walmart. Alexa, call Troy. These are basic functions that we normally would have taken care of ourselves, and now we're asking technology to serve as the go-between.